Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Apothecary. This is a 2-coin and potion cost action card from Alchemy, and it says +1 card, +1 action, reveal the top 4 cards of your deck, put the coppers and potions into your hand, put the rest back in any order. So Apothecary's primary function is to help you draw through a deck that's still got a lot of coppers in it. Now, in order to properly assess Apothecary, I'm first going to need to talk a little bit more about copper. I've done a video about copper before in part of the base cards that was at the end of the base set. So this is just going to be a very, very quick summary. If you want to know a lot about copper, I'd suggest you watch that other video instead. So copper is a very inefficient and weak stop card. It's not useless, but it's such unbelievably poor value because it's so weak. Usually better off trashing it, getting rid of it, and then just purchasing better, more efficient cards in their place, even if those cards are like silver and gold, right? They're still way better than copper. Now, I usually start the game with 7 coppers. That's a lot of coppers, a lot of bad stop cards to have. The fact that you start with them is sort of the best thing that copper has going for it, because you don't have to buy them. Why would you buy copper most of the time, right? It's absolutely terrible. Now, when you have lots and lots of stop cards, it's very hard to draw. Even if you have really strong draw cards, you will struggle sometimes to actually get through your deck. You always run the risk of failing because those stop cards can clump early in the turn, or even all in your starting hand, right? As long as you have like at least 5 coppers, there is the risk that you start a turn with 5 coppers and you don't go anywhere on your turn, right? You just achieve very little. So Apothecary helps you to draw coppers, but if you have a lot of coppers, you're still sometimes going to struggle to draw your deck. Right, Apothecary doesn't make like coppers free in your deck. You will still have a challenge to get through, even though it makes it easier to do it. Right, I mean, when you think about it, Apothecary could be a very strong draw card, right? If it reveals 4 coppers, then it drew you 5 cards, which is crazy good for a draw card, especially one that's non-terminal. But you know, it's not really necessarily going to do that, and you might still not do much else on your turn, or draw very much else. So is Apothecary like an alternative to trashing your coppers? Like, what if instead of getting rid of them, you just decided, you know, I'm not going to trash my coppers, I'm going to buy Apothecaries instead? Well, this would have an advantage. For a start, you know, the coppers are not useless and they're worth some money, right? You rely on coppers at the start of the game to earn money, and instead of like buying back or gaining silvers, golds, or other forms of money, you know, what if you just made it easier to draw them and you just used that economy right away and kept using it for the rest of the game, right? In theory, you know, this sounds reasonable, but in practice, there are sort of 3 problems that Apothecary has. So number 1, typically, you normally want to buy trash cards anyway. If you can remove estates, that's fantastic. Estates are really, really bad, much worse than copper in your deck most of the time. And if you're trashing the estates, then honestly, you might as well trash the coppers too, if it's possible. Number 2, instead of investing in Apothecary, what if you've spent those buys and gains on the replacement economy that you need when you've trashed all the coppers? Right, so what if every Apothecary like was a silver? Well, you're still going to have a bunch of money from a card, right? Like, so you're not necessarily saving on investment, right? You're just swapping one type of purchasing and gaining for something else. So you're not really like making savings in that regard. You know, the fact that you start with the coppers doesn't mean you're getting away with not buying any money. Apothecary is a potion cost card as well, number 3. This can make getting a lot of them a very big investment. Obviously, we've got a whole video on potion, but it's a big deal for Apothecary. It's actually hurt quite a lot by the fact that it costs a potion. So Apothecary is going to draw you the most cards, or at least is most likely to, right near the start of the game, because most of your deck is copper, right? At the very beginning of the game, most of the time, 70% of your deck is copper. That's a huge density to have of copper in your deck. But the problem is that in order to get an apothecary, most of the time you have to buy a potion, you have to shuffle it in, you have to draw the potion. Only then do you finally now start to buy the apothecaries. But also potion limits the number you can buy to only one per shuffle per potion. So, if apothecary was like a 4-cost card, well, you could buy one and then you could use like workshops to gain them, and you could get any number of them like in a shuffle. But with potion, you only get one. This means it's very slow to amass a lot of them. Now, because it's giving you +1 card, +1 action, what we call a cantrip effect, it is safe to add many. They don't use up space in your deck, so to speak, right? They replace themselves when you play them with the next card in your deck. So you want to add a lot of them to maximize the chances of drawing coppers, right? The more apothecaries you have, the more cards you get to reveal, the more chances you pull the coppers out, and then there's less cards for your other cards to draw. But it's slow to get lots of them, right? You want lots of them because of its cantrip and its pulling nature, and the potion cost doesn't let you do that. Now, could you just buy the potion and then buy 1 or 2 apothecaries? Well, that's very difficult because potion is quite a big upfront investment, right? You buy the potion, especially if you buy it straight away on turn 1 or 2. That could have been some other card that costs 4, and there's a whole range of cards out there that cost 4 that you want to open with and not potion. So just saying, oh, okay, I'm going to get a potion right at the start of the game, eventually I'll get around to trashing my coppers, and then, it doesn't matter that my coppers are gone because apothecary is a cantrip, right? So it's not using up space. It's really hard to justify doing that with apothecary because you've got to spend the buy and the gain on this potion. So you just sort of don't get that opportunity. So in practice, if you're going to go for apothecary, you've got to have a deck where you're expecting it to be useful throughout the whole game. So all of this slowness inherent in potion, you take it into account, basically. Now, apothecary, because it's very good at drawing coppers and the decks are fairly inconsistent, if they've got a lot of coppers, you can get pretty inconsistent turns in terms of the amount of money that you want to spend. Apothecary is very good at pulling your potion into the hands where you also have more money. That's because, it doesn't just draw coppers, it draws your potion as well. So if you play an apothecary, you might draw 2 coppers and a potion, and now you've got 5 money and a potion to spend, right? When you have the turns where you play the early apothecaries are going to be the ones where you have a load of money, and they're also the most likely to also have your potion in it, thanks to what apothecary does. Now, apothecary doesn't cost much in terms of coins. It's only 2. It's the potion's the big deal. But what this means is that you can end up early on, especially in apothecary games, where the turns where you have lots of money are the ones that also have your potion, and now you're facing a bit of a dilemma because you've got 5 coins and a potion, and it's well, the 5-cost cards are really good in this kingdom, but do I want more apothecaries? Because now I'm spending 5 and a potion on an apothecary, right? And that stinks, really, because then either you sort of massively overpay for the apothecary, right? That's a lot of money to pay for apothecary. Or you just say, well, I guess I'm not buying an apothecary this shuffle. And the slow nature of getting apothecaries due to the potion cost is now even worse, right? So what this means is that sources of plus buy are very good for apothecary. You can't look at gainers because, apothecary can't be gained by normal means because of the potion cost. So especially engine components like Council Room or cantrips like Market, these are very, very good sources of buy for apothecary. And we'll go into why that is soon. But, if you can get good buy reasonably early, that's very good for apothecary, especially if there are other cheap engine components around as well. So when do you buy apothecary? Well, in reality, apothecary is almost always bought when it's not possible to trash your coppers, or it's really, really difficult or impractical to trash them. So an example of where there might be trashing, but you don't really want to trash coppers, could be there's remodel, and the only 2-cost card is estate. So your only choice of remodeling copper is to turn it into like estate or curse, which you don't really want to do. And then it's like, well, you wouldn't really want to be playing remodel plays just to do that. So what this means, Apothecary tends to be like a fallback option to the fact that good trashing doesn't exist, rather than picking it as an alternative to trashing. Right? You don't look at a board that's got good trash cards and has also got Apothecary and say to yourself, well, because Apothecary's here, I'm not going to be trashing this game. Like, that tends not to happen, right? What it means is you just don't get the Apothecary right. The trashing is better. Apothecary is fairly weak and it's skipped often for this reason. So Apothecary can help you support a more traditional type of deck, but the engine's not going to be as good, usually, as one that just got rid of all of the coppers and didn't bother with Apothecary, right? Because of that inherent nature of having a lot of stop cards stuck in your deck. So Apothecary, like, is there trashing? Is it good? Like, if there was, like, Chapel and Apothecary, like, you're just not buying Apothecary, right? Like, it's just not happening. So when we play with Apothecary, what you really want to do is you want to try and make the most of that part where it reveals the top 4 cards and tries to pull in coppers and potions, right? You really want to be trying to draw as many coppers as you can with this so that your other cards get the chance to draw everything else. So when you play one, draws the first card, and then the next 4 cards are looked at, all the coppers and the potions go into your hand, and all the ones that are not copper or potion, you get the chance to rearrange them, but they all go back on top of your deck. So if you played another Apothecary straight away, what would happen is one of those cards would go into your hand, but then if there were any others that you top-decked, you're just going to reveal them again, and that's not great because that's eating up one of those 4 slots of cards to look at that could be copper draws. I think I'll demonstrate this with a pictorial example if you don't understand what I mean. So let's imagine this example here. We have a deck of 9 cards, and in this particular example, we just happen to know what the top 5 cards are. They're 2 coppers, estate, copper, estate. Right, why do we know them? It doesn't matter. Maybe we, played a navigator, I don't know. But just for demonstration purposes, we know these 5 and we don't know what the next 4 are. So if we start by playing an Apothecary, we will draw the first copper, and then we will look at these other 4, these 2 coppers and 2 estates. We will pull the other 2 coppers into our hand, so we've just drawn 3 coppers, and 2 estates are going to get put back on top of the deck. The order doesn't matter in this case, but we would get to choose the order that they go in. Now, if I was to play another Apothecary, this first estate would be drawn, but then I would be looking at an estate and 3 other unknown cards in this case, right? And that's sad because the estate, I guarantee that wasn't a copper, so I've just sort of reduced how well the next Apothecary can do. However, let's imagine that we had a market in our hand as well, and we play that first, or any cantrip, but I'm just using market as an example here, and we use that to draw one of our 2 estates. Then we play another Apothecary from our hand, we draw the second estate, and we get to look at all 4 of the unknown cards, and so we have now 4 chances to draw coppers and potions instead of 3, right? Because there's no guaranteed miss in this set of cards. So what you tend to find with Apothecary is that you will be alternating Apothecary plays with other cards, cantrips or draw cards, in order to try and make the most out of the Apothecaries. So Apothecary struggles to get past all of your non-copper cards on its own. So you do need other forms of draw or cantrips to draw past the other revealed cards. If you don't have that extra support, as you saw in the example, Apothecary is just going to be top decking all your victory cards, and it's going to struggle to get through them. Right? They're all going to chain up on top of your deck and be stuck there unless you have something else. And this is bad because that probably means that you're going to go into next turn with a bunch of stop cards, or potentially, and then your next turn might not be very good. This is another reason why I said early on Apothecary, sometimes you have very inconsistent turns where some are pretty bad and some of them you get quite a lot of money. This contributes towards that. Now, when I say you need other draws or cantrips, Apothecary is a cantrip, right? So if you have enough Apothecaries, then hey, your Apothecaries will help you draw past all of the other non-copper cards. But it's hard to get enough Apothecaries fast enough because of the potion cost. So really, you do need something else, right? If the only action card you're thinking of playing is Apothecary, it's not going to be very good, usually. Now, as time goes on, as you play decks with Apothecary, you are very rarely going to be buying more coppers in a game, unless there's Fountain. It's exceptionally rare that you are intentionally buying more coppers over the 7 that you already have. What this means is that the density of your coppers is just going to go down and down and down as the game goes on. It started off really high at 70%, but just every card you add, it's most likely a non-copper, and just that gets lower and lower. What this means is that Apothecary will find it harder and harder to find coppers every time you play it. So as the game goes on, each individual Apothecary is going to get a little bit worse over time, right? It's going to look like an amazing card early on in the game, and then even your other Apothecaries will start to get in the way of your Apothecaries. Now, if there's no trashing and there's junking attacks like Witch, your deck's going to get real bad in a hurry, right? That copper density is going to get very low, and you're going to have all these curses in there. Apothecary is very quickly going to be doing not that much for you. It's also going to start getting quite hard to pair it up with the other cantrips that you need to start drawing through your deck. And as a result, the Apothecaries aren't really going to be doing very much for you. In this case, rather than investing in the potion and buying all the Apothecaries, maybe you're better off just not doing it and going for silvers instead. Right, that's something that I've found sometimes if junking is too fast, it's like Witch, really good junking. The Apothecary, it just can't. It can't hope to deal with it, unfortunately. You can't get the Apothecaries fast enough to get your deck in a good enough state, right? So, yeah, it all clogs and it's just miserable. Now, you are looking at cards on top of your deck and rearranging them. I call this the deck inspection effect. A bunch of cards do this. So Navigator does it, Sentry does it, right? It looks at cards, it can put them back, rearrange them. You can use this, like all those other cards, to set up things like Wishing Well and Vassal. However, you tend not to buy Apothecary just for this, and that is because, again, the potion is too big of an investment for Apothecary, right? I'm not buying Apothecary just to set up Wishing Wells, right? It's too much effort, too much expense. There's too much opportunity cost in buying that early potion. If I wanted the Apothecary anyway, then yeehaw, right? Wishing Well, it's great. Because I'm going to be buying a bunch of Apothecaries, and then it helps me draw past 2 estates at once or something. I can guarantee a bunch of Wishing Well draws. Fantastic. So when you are already using Apothecary, do keep your eye out on these sorts of combos, like Wishing Well, Herald, Vassal, and so on, because they can be very good with those. So, just to summarise these points, you're almost always buying Apothecary because you can't trash copper, right? That's the reason why you get it. You just have no reasonable ability to trash them, and so Apothecary helps you deal with them in another way. In the absence of trashing, sometimes building the engine is quite hard. Apothecary makes it more viable again. Right now you can feasibly try to go for a deck that plays a bunch of bridges, even though you've still got all your coppers in play. You can use it with a more basic treasure-heavy strategy, a more big money-ish sort of board, but typically, your Apothecary is helping you build the engine, right, and the engines tend to be fairly good. The potion is a big investment. This stops it sort of being bought for short-term or situational purposes. You tend to be in it for the long haul whenever you're buying Apothecary, thanks to that. It doesn't really work on its own. It's not good draw. You do need other things. Could be other draw cards. It could be stuff like Cellar and Warehouse. You draw up coppers and then you push past them. And you need these because otherwise your deck will clog up. So that's everything I have to say about Apothecary. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head over to the online client. We are going to be generating some random boards with Apothecary, and we are going to assess how good these are, or how good Apothecary is on the board. So what do we have here? The only trashing... Oh, there's Ambassador for trashing. That's really strong. Okay, yep. So Ambassador gets you thin reasonably, and there's Wharf Fishing Village. There's also Apprentice. There's there's technically Transmute, but we're not buying Transmute. There's no way. Why would we ever buy Transmute here? Ambassador gets us thin very fast, and then there's Wharf Fishing Village, and there's Throne Room as well, and there's Mill, so you can draw up a lot. You can discard with Mill. You can just keep drawing. There's no good gains. Oh no, there's Wharf for plus buy. Yeah, so the engine's mental, and you get thin very easily with Ambassador. You are not buying Apothecary or Transmute. Potion is completely useless here. We're probably not even going for Sea Hag, because why curse your opponent when they get thin very quickly with Ambassador and then they just throw the curses at you, right? Ambassador is a much better junker card, so we use Ambassador for junking. So it's literally Wharf Fishing Village, Ambassador. These are like the key cards on this board. We ignore both of the potion ones here. I think this one is fairly clear, so we'll just move on to the next one. Next up, we have, there is Upgrade to Trash. That is our only trashing, and it's decent as trashing. There is no Village. We do have... We've got Pawn as non-terminal buy, or there's Baron. What are our terminal cards? There's Moat, which we're not playing. The only attack is Bandit, whatever. There is Workshop, there is Baron, there is Bandit. So we get to play one of these every turn. Is it Bandit? Is it Baron? How are we drawing? So there's only Apothecary as draw, which you didn't really draw on its own. I'm not sure how good Baron is going to be. Workshop could get us a load of merchants. We could just be playing lots of merchants every turn, right? We can get Upgrade. We can trash down the coppers, we can workshop a whole load of merchants, and then we're playing a load of merchants and a silver. Maybe we workshop a few more silvers later on. We hit 8, we buy single province. So that's a thing we could do. Is that at risk of Bandit stealing our silvers? Maybe, but we could always just workshop back the silvers and have some spares, so maybe that's not a problem. I'm not sure how good Bandit is. It seems slower than just workshopping and buying a load of merchants very quickly. And getting Upgrade, and getting multiple upgrades you can thin, and then eventually the upgrade trashes into a gold if you need it, just to make it very easy to hit province. Maybe that's what we do. Is Apothecary going to be any better than that? I don't think so. So the problem is that we spend a load of effort trying to draw up a load of coppers with Apothecary, and then what are we going to do? Right? None of these really feel all that great. I guess there's Baron. You can Apothecary, you can Baron, and discard the estate. Maybe you draw, but you need ways to get a bunch of merchants, and that's probably going to be stuff like Workshop you'd do instead. And to be honest, upgrading the estates into merchants and silvers feels a little bit better. So I think we're not going for Apothecary. We're going to trash a load with Upgrade, and we're going heavy merchant and Workshop. That feels reasonable to me. There is always Pawn to, if you need a buy, I guess you get a non-terminal buy, right? Maybe you can still one pawn in. I don't know, Pawn's not great here, I guess. I don't think it's good enough. I think when the merchants run out, I'm just workshopping silvers, probably. Yeah, or maybe even you upgrade the workshop into a secret passage and then you upgrade it again into a bandit or something, or a duchy. I don't know. Well, we can workshop secret passages and upgrade them into duchies later on. Actually, that seems really good. So I think it's clearly workshop. When I start to run out of coppers, I can just workshop secret passage next turn, upgrade it into duchy, and I think that gives me very strong endgame control. So, yeah, we're not apothecarying because I'm going to be upgrading. I do like the value that I get from upgrade on that kingdom. So, yeah. And then, we might as well trash the coppers. Right, this next kingdom, we have no trashing at all, but interestingly, we have Swindler. So Swindler's a problem with Apothecary because it turns coppers into curses, and you start losing your coppers. And that's bad for Apothecary, right? Because it doesn't want curses, it wants coppers. So this was looking like maybe it would start to be a reasonable Apothecary kingdom. Like, we've got Wishing Well, we've got villages, throne rooms, bridge, we can draw with nobles, we got outpost, right? There's a reasonable engine to have here. The problem is that there's no trashing, except we have Apothecary. Now, the deck is good enough with Outpost and Nobles that I do wonder if we go for Apothecary anyway. I'm certainly not using Herbalist. I'd be trying to do a bridge thing. What's the alternative? So the alternative to that, Duke gives us an alternative where we basically go Swindler to screw up the opponent using Apothecary and then try to Duchy Duke. So it could be Duchy Duke with Swindler support. Actually, that's not bad. I wonder if the Swindler is good enough at screwing up the Apothecary that is what you do, right? Because if your opponent is trying to do a bridge thing, like your Swindlers turn their Wishing Wells into silvers, that's bad for them. The Apothecaries, well, they get it back. If you can hit a bridge and turn it into potions, actually, they get villages, throne rooms, bridges, and you're turning them all into potions. That's really bad for them. They get a load of Apothecaries very quickly, to be fair, if they have multiple, but you really don't want that. The question is, do they get to mass pile out the provinces with a big bridge turn, especially with throne room to make that easier, before you cause too much havoc to their deck with Swindler? So I think there's a choice here. We open double Swindler, and we're basically just swindling silvers, duchies, dukes. That's it. We just want to go mass play Swindler as often as possible and just buy a load of duchies. Or we try and do the Apothecary deck. Now, arguably, that deck can also be playing Swindlers and can be trying to screw over the duchy player by turning their duchies into outposts and their dukes into outposts, which are really bad for the Duchy Duke player. And I wonder if some sort of hybrid with the engine Apothecary, I think it's allowed to do the long game, right? If your opponent is trying to Duchy Duke, what's the other pile that they're going to empty? Maybe over time, these piles get low, but what you can probably do is you can, well, how good is it? You're sort of hoping that you annihilate their duchies and their dukes with Swindlers, and so the game goes on long enough that they start losing all their points. And then you go for one big bridge mega turn. So the curses are sad, right? The Swindler turning, I think the Apothecary play would be very clear if it wasn't for Swindler. The curses are harsh enough. Wow, this is one of those kingdoms you really got to think about. There's great draw for Apothecary, and they're earning nobles points as well, aren't they, to be fair? Because the Duchy Duke player doesn't really want to be buying nobles on 6. Maybe they do, but I think they'd rather rush for the duchies and dukes, right? I think this is in favour of the Apothecary, to be honest. I think the engine is better here, and it's also more fun. And it's got Wishing Well, which is nice with Apothecary as well for just more fun, I guess. Outpost really helps it as well. So I think what you do is you actually open... Maybe they do get a Swindler, so maybe they open Swindler and Potion, and they look to get Apothecaries and flip into Bridge, and get villages, and then start getting like wishing wells with the bridges, and start just trying to amass a load of components, eventually get outposts, get nobles. So I think this is a good apothecary board here. Like this is a good shine. It's tricky because of Swindler. If it wasn't, this would be just a wonderful apothecary board, quite frankly. So there you go. That's what apothecary boards look like. A whole bunch of interesting interactions. That's actually quite an interesting kingdom for one that's this is very cool. Right, here we have, there is Sentry to trash down. Now there is Gardens, but you're not really doing Gardens apothecary deck. Right, that's not a thing. It's not a good alternative. So what happens if we get thin with Sentry? Well, the big problem I notice is that there's no real draw. Apothecary is the only draw. And you don't, apothecary warehouse, it's like it's not real draw. You're not keeping a load of coppers just to warehouse them. That doesn't make sense. There's villages, there's conspirator. Okay, so what we're doing is we're getting thin with Sentry. We've got villages and conspirator. There's even salvager we can pick up early on, actually, just to help us hit. Like on a 4, we use that. We're playing villages and warehouses to trigger our conspirators, and we've got festival for an extra buy, or even salvager, and we've got, can we do anything funky with replace? Mining villages, I'm just thinking you can even blow them up at the end of the game for big money, like points. Maybe replace is not so good here, but I think this is conspirator engine, and for conspirator engine we want to be really, really thin, so that's what we're going to be doing. Right, sentries and mining villages help trigger the conspirator, and warehouses trigger the conspirator. You just want a load of conspirators. We need a buy with festival so we can start buying multiple conspirators. Would be nice if we could replace estates into conspirators, or mining villages, but I think it comes too late. Sentry cleans out the estates too quickly. So I think that's what we're doing. Apothecary is no good here. The apothecary deck struggles because what's it going to be doing? Right, the apothecary deck, you might say to yourself, well, why don't we go apothecary conspirator and not trash? But Sentry's really good for this deck anyway, and apothecary, so I think conspirator festival, these are good enough to get our money that we don't need coppers, we don't want them around. The inconsistency of the apothecary deck will actually hurt us quite a bit in the long term, I think. You can get a very reliable conspirator engine going, and that's just really strong. So, no good for apothecary here. And now it is time for the last kingdom. So, we have 3 alchemy cards. Apothecary, Alchemist, and Apprentice. Apprentice is a trasher. There is also remodel and replace, so 2 remodel variants. And there's our opponent's pirate ships. Well, clearly not that. What can we do here? So, trashing coppers is harsh here. It's difficult unless our opponent goes for pirate ship. In fact, is Apothecary doomed? Because I'm just imagining a world where if someone tries to go apothecary, you just trash all their coppers with pirate ship. Normally that's really good, but if they've got potion and copper, you can just trash the potion and the coppers. Very rare do I see or even think of pirate ship to do that, but that is a thing you could do. What's the other alternative? There's drawing with Alchemist. So we can look to slowly apprentice coppers, and we draw with Alchemist. We get an artisan. We maybe pick up replaces and apprentices and villages with artisan. We can ironworks villages. Ironworks is even good here. It's not great because all it really gets you is village, pirate ship, remodel, silver. It's not super good, but what we can do is we want to hit artisan. Do we open silver potion and go for an alchemist stack? Maybe that's what we do. We slowly trash down with apprentice, and then eventually we are... I guess we're going to be ironworksing some 4-cost cards like remodel. We replace them into harems just to curse our opponent, and get 6s that we replace into province over time while we're doing the whole alchemist thing, and we use that because there's no plus buy, So if we want multiple provinces per turn, we just very slowly work our way up. And we've got Ironworks anyway, because... Actually, why do we have Ironworks? What's it getting us? Village? I don't care about that. I would rather replace... Ooh, do I want to replace my potion? Because Alchemist needs the potion, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, we artisan stuff, right? We're not Ironworks. We're gaining things with artisan, of course. That's what we're doing. So, okay, we can look to draw with Alchemist. We thin down with Apprentice, mostly. We ignore Apothecary here because we've got an alternative draw engine, and we draw our deck fairly consistently. The Apprentice, we can sometimes trash some stuff just to draw if we need to, so it's actually pretty efficient after a certain point. We get extra cursing done with Harem just for kicks, and then we look to replace our way up to province, and we replace that and we give out another curse, and we're sort of winning the point war off of tie breaks with curses that are coming from replace, I guess. So that's what we do. We're trashing our own coppers. You're not touching pirate ship. Apothecary is bad here. If your opponent wants to Apothecary, you just let them do it, I think. Now, you might, to be fair, get an Apothecary if you miss Alchemist, right? I think we go for Alchemist, and if you ever whiff and you hit 2 potions instead of 3, by all means buy the Apothecary, right? It'll be fine early on. But eventually it's no use. Well, hey, guess what? You can trash it with Apprentice or Replace, right? You can eventually turn it. You might even be able to remodel or replace it into an Alchemist, right? Because they're both potion cost cards. So it's fine, but you're not really doing an Apothecary deck. You might get some by accident just because you're going for a better potion cost card for this board. That's what I think. So, okay, so we had one really good Apothecary board, and then we had this one that was sort of accidentally you buy it because there's another potion cost card sometimes. And then you turn it into the other potion cost card. Yeah, so that's sort of fairly typical for Apothecary. You just skip it a bunch sometimes. It's usually worse than just trashing. Anyway, I hope this was useful for you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.